Hello everyone and welcome to the Society of Editors Conference 2020. My name is Sarah Brown and I head up news partnerships for Facebook in Northern Europe. Sadly, I won't be seeing you in person this year because of the extraordinary circumstances over the past few months, but it's been incredibly inspiring to see the amazing work that publishers all across the UK have been doing to ensure that despite everything going on, you've been connecting people to the stories that matter most to them. This has been incredibly inspiring to see, and Facebook hopes to continue working with all of you in the future to make sure those stories are being connected with the people who need them most. Thank you so much again for all your fantastic work and looking forward to all the sessions today.
Hello everybody. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Nigel Railton and I'm the CEO of Camelot UK and have been since 2017. In the current challenging circumstances, I'm so glad that Society of Editors annual conference is able to go ahead, albeit I suppose in a very different and innovative way. We're now in our 26th year of operating the National Lottery, and Camelot has supported Society of Editors for 19 of those 26 years. Thanks to your and your journalists' invaluable support over that time, a number of things have been able to happen. National Lottery winners have been able to share their good news. Missing ticket holders have been united with their winnings, and a huge range of good cause and charity projects have been able to highlight the difference that they make thanks to vital National Lottery funding. And the 30 million that's raised each and every week by National Lottery players has never been more crucial than it is right now. Earlier in the year, the National Lottery distributors announced that 600 million in funding was going towards COVID relief. Now that's the biggest financial contribution outside of central government. And we're continuing to work with them and others to do as much as we possibly can on this long road to recovery. We remain fully committed to keeping the National Lottery up and running, and in particular supporting our 44,000 retail partners who have been vital to the National Lottery's success since 1994. And I must say they've done an amazing job, I'm sure you'll agree, through this lockdown period and indeed through the whole COVID experience. We of course have a shared interest in that regard as well, as many of our retailers and newsagents so sell both our products and yours. I know that things are uncertain right now, and for many of us, and I know it's something that's been said over and over, but we at Camelot are fully committed to supporting the Society of Editors and the UK media more generally, and we really are all in this together. If there's anything I or my team can do, or you've had any feedback on how we could work better together, then please do not hesitate to get in touch with me. Anyway, thank you for allowing me to say a few words, and I'll let you get on with your session now. Thank you for all that you're doing, and I hope that you and your family stay safe and well, and hopefully in the not too distant future I'll be able to see you again in person. Until that time, thank you very much.
Well, welcome everyone, and thank you very much for joining us once again at another session of the virtual conference 2020 for the Society of Editors. As you know by now, for obvious reasons, we cannot hold our usual conference gathering at this time of the year in person. And instead of having you to watch a day long of screens and interviews, we've spread this out over a few weeks with panels and interviews. And I'm delighted to welcome Rachel Corp, who is editor of ITV News, as the latest in our In Discussion with Keynote talks. In that way, welcome, Rachel. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. It's absolutely lovely to join you.
And can I start by offering congratulations, slightly belated, on confirmation of you in the role. I know it's not that new, but and you had been carrying out the role for a while because of difficult circumstances, but now you're now confirmed in the position. How have you found it, and how do you think you will find it going forward?
Thank you. I think we always say, oh gosh, it's the busiest time ever in news. I do think the last 3 years have been particularly busy, not least the last 9 months, of course. And even before that, Brexit, elections, and the rest. So it's been pretty relentless, but it's a fantastic job. I love it. It's a really, really great newsroom. I sort of had three or four priorities when I came in, and actually they still ring true today. But particularly, the number one thing, bold and distinctive and very original journalism, which we've been doing in spades and continue to do, wants to drive ratings. Obviously, this year ratings have been up across the board for TV News. We've had some record viewing figures, which is great. But we were up before that in the last 2 or 3 years as well. So I've been seeing that trajectory, which has been fantastic to see. But also really trying to push our digital and making sure that we are expanding in that area and reaching new audiences that way. And then also diversity, both on and off screen, and making sure that our programmes really reflect our audiences as well as the people who are making those programmes. And those are such important things that are still true now and are going to continue through as I progress in this role. Obviously, we've had to deal with Corona, and there's a lot of the implications of that. But it's also, it is an interesting and dare I say it, exciting time for broadcast news in that sense, because we do need to reach new audiences and look for new ways. And one of the things that we're doing over the next few years is quite a modernisation project where we're really looking at all the different ways that we work. And whilst TV news is flying still and it's up here, digital is getting more and more important, and want to get to a stage really where we're better equipped and much more agile to adapt to different audiences, to different services, to different platforms, and make sure that we can do that and serve all those audiences. So yeah, interesting times ahead. Also, a very, very key time for the PSBs, the public service broadcasters, and very much I think we've proved ourselves this year, but it's a time to continue with that message and making sure that people really understand that trusted impartial news is needed right now as much as ever before, really.
Well, yeah, thanks for that brilliant overview of the situation. And I mean, we went skillfully over several topics, which we will come back to and pick up. But if I can take you right back to the beginning of what you were saying there, you were saying that you've seen at ITV the trajectory even before the pandemic was of audiences going up. What do you put that down to in a growing cluttered audience, shall we say?
Well, I like to think part of it is about the value in trusted, impartial news, but also the distinctive journalism. And we do very much try to give something a bit different to our audiences. We very much put people at the heart of our news, partly in what we offer, but also in the type of coverage we do in the stories. And perhaps try and champion some of the stories that aren't getting through, bringing out injustice where there is, shining a light on what's going on. And I think that has given us a kind of character and something that stands out. I think as well, much as everybody rolled their eyes and said not another day of Brexit over the last couple of years, people were tuning in throughout Brexit. They wanted to know what was happening. It mattered. And we were trying to navigate a lot of the complications for people, but also continue to point out why it was so important. So much as to say people thought there was Brexit fatigue, there really wasn't. And gosh, politics was interesting last year. It's continued to be interesting this year as well. But there was nothing boring about covering everything that was happening last year and doing it in an engaging way, I think.
Do you think that that people are still as interested in Brexit, or has it been simply pushed to one side now by COVID-19?
I think it has been. I think everything's been pushed to one side by Corona for a lot of this year, though clearly some very important themes have come out as well, including Black Lives Matters and racism and all of that. And it's good to see that Corona hasn't got rid of all those things. And in fact, racism was one of our editorial priorities for the year before, during, and continues on. So I think some of that has come through. Of course, it's turned some of the attention away from Brexit because our politicians have been talking less about it as well. But I think as well, this year was always going to be a slightly different year because we have left. So that jeopardy has gone, and now it's working out the next stage. And those sorts of trade talks make less interesting viewing. But gosh, not many weeks to go. And so we do need to tramp up. It's difficult to tell at the moment because every week's crunch week, yet every week we don't seem to get any further. So it's hard to keep that interest up.
I'm gripped by the fisheries policy.
But you see, that's the thing is that it is our duty to make that interesting. And in fact, we are filming this week in northern France to try and illustrate that. But it's, yes, I mean, that was the challenge throughout it, to wade through all the kind of minutiae, but actually remind people why it matters and matters to lives. And that doesn't go away just because we're in trade talks, does it?
Absolutely. And you mentioned also about the emphasis on, you were saying, looking at racism, but also the emphasis on diversity, which is something that, grips the industry, not just our industry, but we know that we have a challenge in the media industry. That I would say the dual challenge of diversity in our newsrooms, and being representative of the communities that we serve, whether we are broadcasters or radio or newspapers or even online, but also diversity in outputs, I would say.
As in diversity of story choice.
Yes, yes, in that way. And have you seen that evolve, or are you taking it any further?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, a big priority for me when I started 3 years ago, and in fact with other roles I've held as well, other editorships. Not because it's just a nice thing to do, because it's key to our survival. We have to be relevant, and we have to be about the audiences that we serve. So we have been doing quite a lot on and off screen, as I said. Partly it's been about recruitment on screen, but also looking at the voices that we use to contribute in our pieces. And I brought in a scheme 3 years ago where in every single editorial meeting we assess, okay, these are the stories we're doing, let's look at the contributors, let's do a kind of breakdown. How are we looking? Are we perhaps skewing in one demographic? Should we bring in some experts in other areas and really challenge ourselves not to go to the typical people? And we will debrief at the end of every single programme and say, okay, this is the number of men, number of women, number of experts who are white, who are ethnic minority, and it just challenges us there and then. And there are some things you don't have a choice over, such as the gender of your prime minister, but you do have the choice over which expert you talk to when you're trying to explain the latest vaccine. So that there's a lot that we're doing there. Plus, there's a lot on and off screen with staff and recruitment and development. And it's, I think there's been quite a drive across the industry for a long time through interns, apprentices, and the kind of lower ends of the scale. But we've wants to make sure that people can rise through the company and making sure that we are recruiting at all levels. We've got so much further to go, like everybody, but I think until we have those people throughout the organisation making a difference on stories, then we can't change. And yes, you do notice when you have different people in the room in the editorial meeting, a different range of stories being proposed, and that's really, really good to see, and just a different take on stories. So you know, it's key, but we've got to keep doing it. I do think as well, going back to what I was saying before about having a range of products and a range of services, I suppose, which digital has allowed us, we can target different content to different demographics, whether it's younger people, whether it's niche groups, niche interests. And I think that's quite exciting about getting to different people. But certainly we do get a lot of feedback since I think we've been more aware of the types of contributors we've been putting on, and people feeling that they are seeing themselves and feeling more represented.
How do you cope with that sort of in the newsroom with your teams? And earlier in our conference, we had we opened actually with a panel looking at mental health in the newsroom, and brought up some very, very strong issues. And when I was editing newspapers, the pace was forever growing. We were expecting more and more from our journalists and others in the newsroom to do to create this whole package. Just thinking about what you were saying about, you know, we seem to have moved on from each, shall we say, news body, whether it be yourselves, whether it be BBC, whether it be a newspaper, I would say as an editor, I know who my audience, my core audience is. I know who they are, so I can target most of my forces in sort of that direction. But now, as you say, quite rightfully, we want to touch as many people as possible. We want to hear as many voices as possible. How does the team cope with that? How do you cope with that? With so many plates spinning?
Yes, I think there's quite a lot there. I think we're very aware of our core audience, and I think you should never forget them. And I'm very proud of the traditional ITV viewer as well. You know, it's not necessarily your London elite establishment, we feel very privileged to go into the homes of ordinary families, particularly in the Midlands, North, Scotland. Obviously, we're watched all over, but it is a privilege going to those homes, and we'll always remember who we're speaking to and that core audience. But I think I think you can always want to grow your audiences. Our programmes are very different in lots of ways. News at 10, we've tried to do something very different with Tom Bradby anchoring that in the last few years. Lunchtime News caters again for a different audience, but I think it's fun. I think it's people enjoy thinking, well, this story might not work for News at 10, but actually, if we put that on a certain social media platform, or we do something with a different treatment for digital, then actually my story that might go in there will get somewhere else. So I think I think people quite like that. Probably some of my team would say, gosh, it is really stressful having to do a version for 10 and a version for digital. But if you're across a story, there are ways that you can do it. I think there are lots of mental health challenges at the moment around Corona, particularly, which we're trying to mitigate in other ways. But I definitely, I've watched it that people say, oh, I'm really gutted my story's been dropped. Every journalist wants to get their story on, but actually, if we can find another outlet, hopefully that's a positive thing.
Absolutely, that's what that neatly brings us on to the elusive youth audience, which was always elusive, but it's now become even more the goal. We all want that youth audience there, and how, if I can ask you for some secrets, how are you setting about actually targeting to get those youngsters off social media and actually, or perhaps staying on social media but following you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it, is to go to where they are rather than expect them to come to you. I mean, Corona and lockdown 1 was fantastic for young people being stuck at home watching telly with their parents. So it was nice to see a growth across all our TV programmes. But we did have set out over the last couple of years to try and target online and digitally and socially some of those younger viewers, and we particularly last year, as key priority for ITV as well, wanted to assess about getting an even younger audience, namely teenagers, proper young audience, and not necessarily expecting to drag them over to telly, but go to where they're seeing things. We did a lot of research as to where they want to get their news and what sort of news, and there is a huge appetite amongst teenagers for news, particularly certain types of issues, it's climate change or racism, but they also want to know the politics. They just want to know it in a kind of bite-sized form. But we did a whole body of research, and one thing that we found really interesting, and I'm sure some of my colleagues or your colleagues, our colleagues who are watching won't be surprised, but we did some testing on teenagers to see where they got their news and the sort of brands that they liked and identified with, and what came across was they weren't very bothered about where it came from, but there were certain brands that cut through, and one of the most popular brands they liked was the Telegraph. Now, obviously the Telegraph will agree with that, but we were quite surprised. We thought that was something that was seen as a brand for perhaps slightly older readers. But no, they were seeing great Telegraph content on Snapchat. So it just shows if you go to the right place. So we've launched a service for young people called The Rundown, which launched initially on Instagram, but is now on Snapchat as well. During Corona, Snapchat actually asked us to come onto the Discover page to give it more prominence, because they knew we were reaching those people who needed to hear some of the government's health messaging. So that's now flying. I think we're 11 million views a month or something, and young people are consuming that. It's bite-sized. It's very short. It is like a little bulletin. It's a mixture of serious news, interesting picture stories, issues, and doing well. So it's a question of going to them, really, rather than trying to assume that they will come to us.
Yeah, I mean, the assumption is wrongfully. I've always felt the assumption is that if it's you reach them through Love Island because that's all that they're basically interested in. But no.
But Love Island, great. But there's just as many 50-year-olds wanting to watch Love Island and read about it as well. But at the moment we've got I'm a Celebrity going on ITV, and a lockdown, which means lots of people at home. So it's a great opportunity for us to get some different audiences who are watching us. We've got great figures at the moment. But that doesn't mean they'll always tune into News at 10. But if they know, ITV News, I know I'm going to get something interesting, then they'll pick up on it, as said, on Snapchat or Instagram or social media.
And staying with lockdown and obviously the pandemic this year, and How have you tackled that? How have you sought to make your offering unique from the BBC, from Sky, from other broadcasters, and the rest of the media? Has that, I was going to ask, has it been a challenge, but of course it's been a challenge.
Has been a challenge, as I don't need to tell anybody watching, I'm sure. I'm really, really proud of how we responded, really proud, because like so many people, we had to change the whole way we worked almost overnight. You know, there was a bit of warning. We were one of the first teams into Wuhan, and we were reporting it all, and we knew it was coming our way, but you couldn't quite work it out till it hit us. But you know, as everybody went to lockdown and most people were going home, journalists, amongst other people, had to work out ways to continue to work and come into the office safely. And we did shift a lot of people home, but we had to find ways that people could operate either on the road or in the office safely. And there was a lot of discussion in the couple of weeks before lockdown amongst the media, very collegiate, very nice, that it might be that we would all get shut down and we would have to share reporters, or we might even have to take each other's bulletins across BBC, Sky, 4, 5, ITV, because it you know, who knew how terrifying this thing was going to be. I am really, really proud, and I'm sure the other services are, we never had to do that. We never had to compromise. And in fact, we never compromised any of our standards, didn't miss a single bulletin, didn't miss a single story. We set out from the beginning to cover this properly. You know, we take our PSB remit really seriously, and we really had a role to play here. And I had a very, very clear editorial stance from the beginning, is that we had a duty, we had to get the government's health messaging out there. We were part of getting that out there, and that's our remit. And wanted to make sure that messaging came across loud and clear without drowning the message in the criticism. But from day one, we said there are going to be people who fall through the gaps, who are disproportionately hit, who aren't helped by all these safety measures, and we need to bring their stories out, and we need to tell their stories. And equally, we weren't going to pull our punches on government just because we were helping getting that messaging out. We very much wanted to hold them to account, whether it was PPE at the beginning, whether it was care homes, the story that we really majored on from very, very early on and highlighted, whether it was testing. Now, so it was quite a delicate balance, but we knew what we wanted to do and wanted to set out to do. And I think the team really rallied, and certainly in lockdown 1, which seems so long ago now, it was really nice to have something to do. I think people felt we have a purpose. When a lot of people were just stuck at home, actually, no, we had to get out there and tell the stories and get around the country, and we had to use Zoom, had to use Teams, all the rest of it, but actually continue to do our eyewitness reporting, get into communities. And so we had something to do, and I think we did some really distinctive programmes and really told the pandemic through people and through people on the ground, as well as, you know, asking all the right questions of government.
I mean, you will be aware, Rachel, that there is a, shall we say, I won't say a fault line, but there is some thought that's coming through that broadcast media have followed more the government line of the pandemic, and print media have been more sceptical, quoting some of the alternative voices about saying, you know, we don't need lockdown at all, and these COVID figures aren't what they are. Do you agree with that? And do you fear that history will look back and say, well, this was all a bit of a panic here, and there should have been cooler minds that stepped back and looked at it?
No, I wouldn't actually interpret it as that. As I said, we were clear that we had to make sure the government's health messaging got out there, and our viewers needed to know the information about themselves, their families, their businesses, what they need to do. But that didn't stop us critiquing it from the beginning. And as I said, certainly things like care homes, which Paul Brand jumped onto really at the beginning, we were asking those questions and getting them out there right from the beginning. I think you all know Robert Peston, who forensically from the beginning writes the most fantastic notes, like, well, this was said on this day, was that right, and do we need to do it? And we've done a lot of going back and analysing all of that. I think we did ask all the questions. I think we continue to ask all the questions throughout. But I think, so we just didn't want to do that at the expense of drowning the message. So I think we were balanced, but we weren't, it's not our role. We wouldn't take a position on saying, well, the government is wrong or the government is right. We just asked the questions and held them to account. And quite often, if we've done an investigation into care homes, we'll take the views of the people on the ground right at the heart of it, and then put that to Matt Hancock or others and do the questioning that way. But yeah, I wouldn't say that broadcasters just sort of fallen for what the government said, whereas print has critiqued at all.
I'm not taking either side in the debate on that. And staying with government, and of course we have to point out at this moment that this is being recorded a few days before, about a week before it will actually go out live. So
anything could happen.
If there's, I was going to say, I mean, since we spoke just before, when we were organising this discussion, of course, all kinds of things have happened though in just a few short days with government. And one of the things I wanted to raise with you was how you thought the communication from the government has gone, and looking forward, how that's going to work with the media. Do you think now that we've got Allegra Stratton coming in as an official government spokesperson, which we've not had beforehand, rather towards an American style? So in the hope that obviously, hopefully, Allegra Stratton will still be in her job by the time this goes on. No reason to doubt it. But do you think it's been the omni-shambles of messages coming out of Downing Street?
I mean, I think nobody's looked particularly good in the last week, and I think obviously it's been great for journalists when we get briefed and get the sort of inside gossip. I don't think it's looked particularly good for anybody involved in number 10. In terms of going forward, I mean, it's an interesting decision to have a spokesperson. Obviously, we know Allegra and have great respect for her from her time as a national editor. That she's very bright, she's a great journalist, she's very passionate about everything she does, and I think she will do it with utmost professionalism. We feel it's not for us to say, oh, you shouldn't be doing this or you should be doing that. Welcome anything where we get access to ask questions. The thing for me would be that it cannot be at the expense of other access. And certainly if they were going to get rid of the lobby, for example, just for this, then we would absolutely fight against that. And in fact, I can't remember if it was earlier this year or back end of last year when there were moves to restrict the lobby and the numbers of people in it. We absolutely stood side by side with colleagues who didn't want that and said we weren't going to take part in that. Obviously that changed, which is good. If the appointment of Allegra and her briefings means we get less access to ministers, that will be an issue. We have been getting access to ministers throughout Corona, which has been important because there's lots of questions. So if it's an addition, then I think it's fine. If we start seeing an erosion of access elsewhere, then I think that will be doing viewers and the British public a disservice. Certainly, we would like to get more access to the Prime Minister. We seem to have all had less access to him over the last year. It was very disappointing, I think, for everybody during party conference, where he didn't do the usual sit downs with Polleds, not because we're entitled to it, but because there's a lot of things that we would like to ask him on behalf of viewers, as I'm sure all the colleagues would. And this year we understand because of Corona, it was a bit different, but hoping that's very much a one-off. And we see things back to normal next year. So, I think I'm interested to see how it will work out with Allegra. Certainly, everything's very civilised and friendly, but as I say, it needs to be an addition, not an alternative.
Do you think there's a fear that we're drifting too much towards an American model? I mean, we've seen, we've just gone through the American election. You may have noticed it. It was a little event that took place over there. And I, for one, I'd be interested in your opinion, was somewhat disappointed, if I can put it like that, at just how partisan the mainstream American broadcasters appeared to be, or I'm afraid I would say were, when it came down to the election in there. They seemed to basically throw their impartiality out of the window and say, this is who we and whatever. We are not at that stage here, but do you think there's a risk that we could be, particularly as we've got new TV stations arriving, 2 new channels? I'm thinking about GB News, I think, which is the Andrew Neil one, which if we believe it, it will be unashamedly more to the right. There's a mooted that Rupert Murdoch may re-enter the field, shall we say, with something, I suppose, to do with the Times or News UK. Is there a risk?
No, there's absolutely loads in your question there. No, I don't. I don't think so. Look, we're still regulated. We're so different as broadcasters to the States because we have got this regulation, and certainly as PSBs we have an obligation. So we don't want to go down that route, but I don't think we could if we wanted to. And I think certainly for ITV, the strength of us is our independence and impartiality, and that's working because look at our viewing figures. So I think there is a great need for that and a want for that. So I don't think you'll suddenly find all the mainstream broadcasters here going down that line. I find it interesting, as you say, observing the mainstream broadcasters out there. I find it slightly hard still to decide how much they are fueling the politics and how much they're a sort of product of it. But it was very interesting, as we all observed then, because it turned into the story for several days, how reticent they were to call the election. And in sort of being a bit insidery here, when as a British broadcaster, when you're waiting for the US nets to call it, that's the narrative of your story. When the results came in, it's like, oh, too close to call, too close to call. You know, that's so different to other years. So it was interesting where they were sitting on the fence there. And I've been surprised about how quickly they've gone relatively quiet, not quiet, more balanced in the last few days as well. You know, when it looked the way that the election was going, it didn't stay as partisan. So that shows maybe you know, some sense on behalf of them. But in terms of the new networks coming in, you know, I welcome anybody into the market. You know, I think there's space for everything, but these new channels will still need Ofcom regulation if they want to broadcast. So yes, there'll be room for debate and discussion, potentially of a different sort. But I think I welcome it in and see it. I don't see it as a danger or a threat. I think, you know, good luck to them. It's quite hard to run a 24-hour news channel and fill it with lots of meaningful content. But yeah, I'll be interested to see what they do. But I don't think it'll suddenly trigger a breakdown in the standards of our broadcasting, or suddenly mean that impartiality is out of the window for the rest of us.
Do you think that, going back to what you were saying about the American broadcasters in particular, I don't want to dwell particularly on that, because I think this has a bearing with us as well over here, that a part of perhaps the reluctance of them to call the results was a lack of confidence these days in the polls. Polls have been wrong and wrong and wrong, or skewed and whatever. Do you think that there's a fact of, as over here as well, that the public are just looking at, shaking their heads and going, just don't tell me about this because I don't believe it?
Yeah, and I think we're all using fewer polls. Certainly in the last election, I don't think we did any apart from the exit poll. Sometimes we'll do more sort of nuanced, how do people feel about certain subjects type polling, but voter intention, you know, I think we've all been moving away from. Obviously, we still do our broadcaster exit poll, which is always a very exciting moment. And in fact, we were pretty much spot on last year, this time. But no, I think there has been a bit of mistrust in polling, and certainly talking to our psephologists who've been doing it for years, I think there was a feeling, certainly the last few years, that we were heading for not a disaster, but heading for things going wrong, because so much has shifted and so much has shifted in allegiances. So whether polling settles down in the next few years, when we're post-Brexit, properly post-Brexit, and people's voting habits change again, and we've got more data to build on. But I agree, it's interesting when we rely on data more and more and more, and we're doing much more data journalism and underpinning things a lot with data, polling is not having its sort of finest moment at the moment.
And do you find that you've got an increasing need to convince the viewer, the listener, that what you're telling us is factually correct? In other words, you can trust our journalism.
Yes, but I hope that's just implicit in what we're doing. And you know, certainly we are all in this world, aren't we, of social media, where if mistakes are made, it's picked up on very quickly. That's not such a bad thing. We all aim not to make any mistakes. We're all fallible. Occasionally mistakes do come, but you face them and you correct them very quickly, and you get out there and you apologise and explain. And I think that authenticity still means that people can trust you. But I don't think we go on air on our TV bulletins sort of feel like we have to persuade people to believe us. I think our journalism hopefully stands up for itself in that sense.
I was thinking somewhat with the backdrop of this, and I make no opinions myself on this, but we know that there has been some controversy in the last few years with regards to the BBC and accusations of bias from both sides and politicians that get involved, same with Channel 4 and to some extent with Sky, but not yourselves as much, shall we say. I'm sure that you get the odd thing in that. What do you put that down to, and do you think that's a good thing to be uncontroversial in that sense, or do you want to make headlines? But come and see us, because
so it's interesting. I think we do make headlines, but I think we make headlines for the right reasons, I hope. I think we do a lot of investigations and distinctive journalism and try to uncover things, and particularly shine a light on things that are happening that people don't know, and those sorts of things do make headlines, but they're not political, and they don't particularly come down on one side or another, and so our impartiality and our independence is in our DNA and is really, really important to us, and we would protect that at all costs. And so I just don't think we would foray into areas of political opinion. We can't. That's not what we're there to do. But it doesn't mean we're uncontroversial. But it's also I have, as editor, tried to steer a very, very steady, straight ship when it comes to the attack and the political attack and attacks on bias. And it's not hard to be independent and impartial, but you do have to fiercely guard that when you are being attacked on all sides, and you have to be confident in your impartial journalism. But I also, I'm very, very protective of opinion. And I know that there's a lot of discussion on we shouldn't have opinion in news. Absolutely, you should have opinion, but it needs to be informed, preferably from a specialist who you hire in that subject for a very good reason. Impartial and informed. And I would hate a world where suddenly you can't have opinion in journalism. We need analysis. We need to do a take. When people tune into news at 10 or evening news, it's because we have experts who will navigate the news for them, and with their experience will be able to say, this is my analysis of this story and this is why. But that shouldn't leave you open to accusations of bias or for being partial in any way.
We're coming towards the end of our discussion. Thank you so much for your time. I wonder if I could ask if you can see any serious clouds on the horizon, any real things that might keep you awake at night to do with the media itself and your industry, particularly your part of it.
Oh gosh, lots keeps me awake, whether I confess to all of it. I do think, I think regional news is incredibly important. And I think more so now than ever, particularly post-Brexit and everything else, this country has a whole range of opinions and experiences and lifestyles, and we need to make sure we are understanding people and being relevant to them. We're very lucky at ITV with our regional network, which others have. And I'm aware at how tough it is in other sectors of the industry and regional newspapers and radio and other broadcasting, and that worries me, that we will see we will all lose if we're not getting good regional journalism. But that moment is something that's robust where we are, and I know a lot of people national broadcasters are moving more people out into regional areas, and that for me has been one of the interesting sides of Corona, is realizing you don't have to all be in an office in London. And actually, if we can see more people based out of London, then I think that's going to be a good thing. That is one thing that does worry me. The future of PSBs worries me. And at the moment, we're in a good place. And I think we've more than proved our worth. And certainly, Peter Bazalgette said the other day that he sees news as the jewel in the crown of ITV's PSB offering. Fantastic. But we need to keep making the case for that, because it's important for us that news continues to have that role for ITV and for others. So that and all of that review is sort of there for me. I think it would be a real shame if the whole situation with PSBs changed. I think there's room for development, and I think there's room for modernisation, but keeping news at the heart of public service broadcasting in the UK is really key. There's probably a whole load of other things I worry about that I don't want to confess to.
Don't worry, I don't want to add to your nightmares. No, no, no. Rachel, thank you so much for your time. I just wanted to ask one question I'm asking everyone during this conference at the very end of it all. Really nothing to do, well, perhaps you may say something to do with our profession, but when this is all over, when the COVID-19 restrictions are finally lifted, we can get back to whatever normal life we had before. What are you most looking forward to doing again? What have you missed most?
I would love to have a really big party in my garden, I think. Well, I love hosting anyway. I want several. I think I'm planning the whole of next summer to have lots of garden parties, but just to have people round. And I would really like to be able to hug them on the way in and on the way out. And I feel, in a way, as journalists, we have been out and about much more. And I've been in the office from day one, but just not being able to hug your colleagues or hug your friends, that one's horrible. So yeah, a good old party and a bit of physical contact.
Well, I'm with you with that one, absolutely.
Come over, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you so much for all of your time. May I wish you all the very best, and congratulations once again on confirmation in your role. And thank you for your time. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Please do tune in to more of the Society of Editors Virtual Conference 2020. All details are on our website, societyofeditors.org. Please follow us on #EditorsUK. Rachel, once again, many thanks. Goodbye.
Thank you.